And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Carlos and I are going to update you on what's happening in OS2. And I'm going to start by going back just a little bit and talk about the vision that we had even in 2016 for a different commercial model for the capital projects industry. It's incredibly relevant even now as we're coming out of this pandemic or going through the pandemic to envision a different business model for the future. And that's really been our goal, to lead with some research that Carlos will talk about next, and think through, sorry, I'm having trouble with the platform here, and think through a different way to execute projects in a more collaborative way. We talk about having a digital neighborhood where no one gets hurt, and by that we mean not just safety, but also financially, reputationally. A lot of times we find companies in our industry, it takes 10 successful projects to erase the results of an unsuccessful project. And so we're trying to have more predictable business results, a more stable return on investment, not just for the owners or the contractors, but literally the entire supply chain. One thing we've noticed is our industry has a lot of transactional waste and a lot of time associated with these transactions. And that gives rise to a lot of risk, a lot of contingency that are put into people's bids, management reserve that's created. And we think we can create a much more healthy business condition or ecosystem. I would say that the industry has largely focused on work process to improve itself over many years, but through that, the commercial model kind of got out of hand. And we have more people participating than ever before. There's actually about one company for every $1 million of spend. The other part here is we have to get away from one project at a time in terms of the commercial model and think in more of a portfolio program or enterprise level scale, especially as it relates to the supply chain. And this is what will create this better return on investment condition, but also get rid of a lot of these duplicative expenses. So some of the challenges that we have, in addition to the fact, as I mentioned, the business model is characterized by a lack of trust and a lot of friction in these transactions. And we're starting with a focus on risk to really understand the individual risk behaviors of people and find ways that we can potentially pool those risks and make a better profitability condition exist for everyone in the supply chain. Recently, McKinsey on June 4th came out with a report, several pages long, and it's called Construction in the Next Normal. And I'd encourage you to take a look at it. But one of the things they said is over the last several years, there's been $11 trillion of value added through our industry, and $1.5 trillion of profits, but that these were very unevenly distributed. And because of that, it's resulted in a lot of challenges for a lot of our industry companies. This results in sort of lack of investment in people and training, also in technology. And they said, looking forward, we're going to have to shift the value around. There'll be new value pools created. They think actually over the next several years, $265 billion of additional value pools will be created. 20 to 30% of the value construction, they're saying, will move to off-site. And this will put pressure on general contractors, especially as the supply chain moves towards this kind of thing. Well, what this ultimately does is they say that 45% of the incumbent players' value is going to be at stake. But yet they're not really talking anything about the commercial model or how that's going to work. And that's exactly what we're doing with OS2. The opportunity exists with these new profit pools to actually double the profit for the incumbent players. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do for the industry and especially for the CII companies. If we can get to a better commercial model, we think that we can solve a lot of the problems that have plagued the supply chain for many years. And so just to put even a finer point on it, there's about 41% of the total installed cost of a typical heavy industrial project is transactional cost or transactional waste. And this has a huge drain on schedule and productivity and quality and a number of things. And you see independent studies have verified all these different areas of where these transactional costs exist. What we're eventually trying to do is get rid of the things that aren't saving us any money. And there are things that are designed to save money. I'll say like the purchase order process, 3 bids and a buy type system. It's designed to save money, but it actually doesn't save much, and it wastes a lot of time in some areas. So in order to get rid of the transactional cost, we have to lean on technology. We have to probably move away from a kind of a vertical integration or conglomerate type approach to one that's we're leveraging technology and groups of trusted strategic alliances with a whole set of specialist companies. We bring that together. We can get investment really from anywhere, and that will change the distinction between owner and contractor potentially. But it'll solve the root cause of where a lot of these transactional wastes and transactional costs are coming from. So our approach has basically been to start in the area of risk and working with leading researchers. It's a little untraditional because largely a lot of them are not from the engineering or the civil engineering departments. That has been CII's approach, and we've broadened that to include professors from business and psychology and a number of other places. But we think by doing this, we can really create a much more robust, we say, digital neighborhood, improve the engagement and the innovation that's here, use a common digital platform, and eventually we'll get to digitalizing the supply chain to a much greater degree. I think disintermediation is another part of that. That would mean really taking a look at places through that supply chain where value is being siphoned off, and then probably move into eventually into a very strong data and analytics type world that's probably a bit more focused on investment, especially life cycle type investment. But this is a long-term effort. It requires a lot of people being involved, and that's why we're doing the webinar today, is to tell you a little bit about OS2, and at the end, and we'll have a series of polls here, but at the end to also try to engage you to be involved and offer your perspective and your opinion with our researchers on how you see this coming out. Our industry is in the midst of being disrupted. Even before COVID-19 started, it was in the midst of being disrupted. And I think if we can solve this ourselves in the industry, it's going to be a lot less disruptive than if we have this done to us. So with that, I think we have a poll that should appear. Okay, so at this point, I think we'd like you to take a stab at making an answer here to what are the main challenges that you see in the capital projects industry for the next normal, and please check all that apply. These are things that we've heard repeatedly from companies in the industry and at CII. Issues related to low return on investment and reductions in capital budgets, and certainly that's true lately. So if you can check all that apply here, we'll give you a second to answer this, and then take a look at the results. Sorry, my screen's pretty small here. So it looks like there's concerns in a lot of areas here. Obviously, the leading things would be the ability to deal with uncertainties and properly manage risks, and also deal with the reduction in capital budgets, as you see. So probably a good time now. I think if you have some questions, and please use the questions part of the system here to ask us some questions. And you can do that as we go through this. And I don't know, Mike, I think maybe you were going to field some questions if we have any.
Yes, we don't have any yet.
Okay, so what we probably should do now is turn this over next to Carlos.
Okay, so Stephen talked about some of the challenges that our industry is facing, and well, the poll that we did a few seconds ago kind of provide your perspectives on some of these challenges. But Stephen also talked about our approach, right? Our approach in terms of conducting cutting-edge research in areas that, at the end of the day, are aimed at creating enhanced business models, improving supplier relationships, and reducing transactional costs. In all this approach, a lot of discussion went at the level of the CII leadership. How are we going to do that? How are we going to conduct this type of research that, as Stephen mentioned, would require a diverse set of faculty than traditionally faculty involved in CI research. So CI research over the last 35+ years have been focusing more, I would say, more at the project level, looking at a lot of those best practices. But here we were trying to look more at a corporate focus, more a portfolio level, bringing the issues around supply chain, finance, accounting, corporate strategy. And because of that, a decision was made last year to create a new research unit. You can think of it as a mini CII, and we call that Operating Systems 2.0 Industrial Affiliates Program. So it's affiliated to CII, and Stephen and I are co-directors. This unit was officially created last year in July, so we are almost 1 year old. And it's linked to CII, but it has its own set of sponsors we call affiliates, right? So the current setup is that we have 3 main company sponsors, so ExxonMobil, BHP, and Suncor. Then we have 2 industry associations, the Construction Owner Associations of Alberta and Engineering Design and Research Center in South Korea. And in addition to these, let's say, company sponsors that, let's say, guide also the development of the program, we've been working with a very large group of researchers. We're going to talk more about them in a few minutes, but we've been engaging about 8 faculty and plus some research scientists and assistants, and even some partners, consultant partners. So we have EPM, CAG, and Peridog. But one of the first steps of the industry affiliate program was to develop what will be the research focus in the first few years. Right, so our first meeting happened last year in October, and at that moment, working with the affiliates, we defined a research focus that, again, it's aimed at creating this, looking at ways to have this shared successful commercial models and practices to streamline these transactions related to project delivery. But these are pretty big areas, so we had to narrow down the focus, and the focus of the first few research projects are in these 5 bullet points listed there on the slide. So we're looking at organizational behaviors and relationships, supply chain rationalization, risk management, partner selection, and how can these business functions can support the deployment of practices and technologies at the project level. Right? Again, the whole idea is that all these commercial models and transactions support a better delivery of projects that at the end of the day would bring benefits to the company's project portfolio and for the company as a whole. So the 4 initial research topics are these 4 on the screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of them in the sequence. So goal congruence and alignment is like an umbrella topic over the other 3. The teams kicked off in January, so we've been working around 5 months at this point. And the way that the team work, it has some similarities. It's not exactly the same, but it has some similarities with the way that the CII research team work, in a sense that we have a group of academics that are interacting with people in industry to address each of these issues, right? And this initial, let's say, involvement of researcher and industry is done with the affiliates. But one of the goals of today's webinar is to broaden this participation in research and even invite you and your companies to be part of this effort as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the topic. So the first one is goal congruence and alignment. And the idea here is to look at more how can the different organizations involved in the projects, from owners, contractors, suppliers, vendors, they can interact with each other in a more collaborative way, acting more like neighbors than strangers. But then it's go beyond looking at relationships at one individual project, but try to do this more in a more long-term perspective, right? So have a long-term view of this issue. As part of this effort, we have a multidisciplinary team of researchers that bring expertise from like organizational behavior, sociology, law, marketing, business. And they are really exploring the way that they are addressing this in terms of a methodology is, well, they're reviewing, let's say, existing collaborative approaches that are out there, like IPD and other older ones like alliance contracting. They're also talking and interviewing folks from companies representing the different players in our industry. Again, to think about better ways, learn what worked, learn from what it didn't work, and try to make things better. But again, with this more long perspective, more project perspective. And at the end of the day, create this environment for you to create this effective neighborhood of collaborating owners, contractors, supply chain partners in general for capital projects. And they are looking at these not only from a relationship, what are some of the legal implications, but even in the long run, how can you create a platform to be able to this neighborhood to function? And that's the relationship with this topic, with some of the other topics that I'm going to talk in this sequence. So the second project called Supplier Engagement, short name. The key words here, the key goals here is that how can you engage suppliers better? How can we engage them earlier in the process to bring innovation, to bring value based on what they know about new materials, new methods, new technologies, new ways of doing things. And when we talk about suppliers, it's very generic, right? It's can be a contractor, can be a fabricator, can be a material supplier. But the whole goal here is that try to learn from other industries that have been doing a much better job in managing the supply chain and adapting to the changes that happen in the last few decades, and try to bring this to our industry, which is still very, let's say, hierarchical in terms of the different tiers of the supply chain, as you can see in the figure on the left. So it's to have that figure of the owner and the engineering consultants, contractors and suppliers, vendors, and so on. A lot of organizations, very hierarchical, and especially if you are in the lower tier of that supply chain, it's really hard for them to get engaged earlier. And sometimes these suppliers, these vendors, are the ones who are becoming more innovative these days, right? And we are seeing a lot of examples of that in industries like automotive, aerospace, and others. And the idea here is try to look at some of these leading practices and see how can we bring them to our industry. So we have two faculty that are from the business school here at the University of Texas. They are in the supply chain group there. A lot of experience in managing supply chain for different industrial sectors. And again, they are looking at how can we bring some of that benefits here to capital projects. So the third topic area is what we call dynamic risk model, right? It's kind of a name here. But what you're trying to do here in terms of risk, I mean, risk assessment and risk management, as we all know, it's pretty important to projects, to companies. But when you look at risk, there are a few issues that we are trying to address in this research topic. One, it has to do with the fact that different organizations, when you look at different project team members, they have different perceptions on the risk. And because of that, well, you put like protection in terms of contingencies and things that pile up on top of each other because you don't have the completely view of the risk. And this risk is dynamic, so it changes over the life cycle of the project. So the idea here is to try to think about different ways to manage risk, to identify, assess, and allocate these risks by going beyond looking just the risk of a particular project and trying to optimize the risk of the project, but at the same time considering the risks of the key players and use this risk model as a way to provide more visibility for these risks in a way that the owners, contractors, the supply chain partners can better have a better discussion around risk and risk management, of course, preserving any confidential proprietary information, but at the same time be able to share ways that at the end of the day you can come up with a solution that is better not only for the project but for the players themselves. So that's the goal there. The last topic, the ongoing topic, is blockchain for smart contracts and risk management. So those are, so think about a blockchain technology. The goal here is to explore this technology that has been successfully used in many other sectors these days to create a data management platform that can facilitate trust, can be more secure, and especially for our industry, speed up transactions, improve information exchange, ultimately leading to economic improving performance of capital projects. So this is, I would say, the technology layer, the information layer that it's gonna be integrated with the other topics that I presented earlier, right? So one of the things that we are doing in the beginning is to explore the use of blockchain for risk management, and kind of in that context of that dynamic risk model, the more collaborative risk model. So how can we create a platform for that? Again, looking at how the technology can bring benefits. And if you look at the topics, the 4 topics covered, you see really, yeah, we have expertise. So the folks involved here in this project are from electrical and computer engineering. You also have a professor in the business school. And as part of our research program, we promoting frequent meetings with the 4 teams. We are also promoting frequent meetings with the affiliates so that we can share information and integrate the different topics, because at the end of the day, they are all a part of that solution, of that vision of looking at a new commercial model and streamlining and reducing the cost of some of these transactions. So in the next slide, we have a poll that it's going to pop up in the screen in a little bit, and it's about research interests, right? So I briefly explained the 4 research topics, and there is an opportunity for you to get involved. So we are taking this opportunity now to see if you have interest in some of these areas, what area we would be more interested in collaborating. Right? And later on, Stephen is going to talk about different ways that you can get involved. Again, the whole idea of having this OS2 and OS2 linked to CII was to expand the CII research portfolio, create new opportunities for members. And we are opening even not only to CII members, but there are some opportunities also that can be for companies in general. So what we're going to do, you have the quick poll there on the screen, and the 4 options are basically the 4 topics that I just described. And what we're going to do, so based on your answers, and we have your registration information, so we'll be able to follow up with you later to provide more information in terms of what's going on in the teams that you are interested in, and also keep you informed of what's going on and can get involved. Again, this is not a binding commitment or anything. It's we are really here to inform you of this opportunity and put it in a way that can benefit you, and by working together, we benefit the industry. I don't know if we already have the results for the poll, Mike. Yeah, so the top ones there, 51%, the collaborative tips, topic 1, go congruence and alignment, and the supplier engagement, a very close third with 49%, and the last one, but still with 27%, the one related to risk, the allocating of risk. So again, thank you all for the input, and we're going to be following up, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Hey, Carlos. Yeah, we got 3 questions for you.
Okay.
One, goal congruency works well when the project goes well and all parties share in the benefits. How does it function when the project goes badly and the venture loses money?
Well, that's the whole point in terms of that. It's try to create an environment for the projects to go well, right? The idea is to be proactive, learn from the projects that didn't go well, learn from the projects that did go well, in a way that you create this more collaborative neighborhood environment moving forward. So that's kind of the goal. And a part of it, it's looking at, contractual aspect, incentives, and so on. Because at the end of the day, everyone has its own objectives. But if you're really going to work together, you want to be in a situation that everybody wins, right? And nobody gets hurt, as Stephen mentioned earlier in the presentation.
Okay. Here's another one. Can my organization participate in more than one of the 4 research topics?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah. So you can, even though maybe in the poll, in the last slide, it was just one option. But if you were interested in more than one of the topics, feel free to contact Stephen and I to provide your information to the 4 research teams. So the idea moving forward is that the research teams are going to be, in contact, and they'll be going to be following up. Since they moving with the research data collection that they started a few months ago.
Okay, and then one more for you. If my company participates in the research, how will we be kept informed as the OS2 process evolves?
Well, that's we're going to be information, kind of an update related to your involvement in the projects and how things are evolving. One thing also that was discussed with CII, since again OS2 is linked to CII, in every board meeting, the CII board meetings, there is an OS2 update. So we update the CII membership in general in terms of what's going on in the research. But again, if you are directly involved in a project, you also have some more specific information due to your involvement with the researchers in the team. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that in terms of the participation.
Well, so that's right. We inform everybody at the board meetings what's happening in OS2, but also on the first one, I think it should be emphasized about the pooling of risk. The problem that you experience on projects where a project doesn't go well and everybody suffers through it, it's because we haven't spread the risks across the entire portfolio or neighborhood. And if you think about something like car insurance, yeah, you go for years paying in premiums just because of the possibility that you might have an accident or the car might be stolen. But you're actually paying for other people's situations that didn't go as expected. And so instead of every project having to take on all the risks, whether they happen or not, this is an aspect of the neighborhood that we're investigating. And that's what that dynamic risk model is really all about. And so that gives rise to the ability to have a situation where nobody gets hurt, that literally you can have basically every project, even if it doesn't go well, people aren't irreparably harmed out of that. And so those are the things that we're looking at. So maybe we should continue on with the last part of the topic here. Let me see if I can share my screen again. So I want to talk a little bit about the pilot projects. And one of the things here is for this not to just be a thought exercise or a research effort, but actually that it's applied research in a way that these principles and new concepts and technologies can be deployed on real projects. And this is really a two-stage approach to studying the application of these research principles that we're uncovering. The first is really to retroactively apply the principles on recently completed or in-flight projects to understand how it could have gone differently. And there's a little bit of simulation or role play that would happen with the different participants in the existing projects. And the questions would go in the form of, if you had blockchain, if you were in a digital neighborhood, if you could have a dynamic risk evaluation, how would you have participated on this project? Specifically, what would your estimate have looked like? How would you have perceived risk and contingency and management reserve through your involvement on the project? And so I think a lot of the CI companies want to be involved in that kind of thing, because we'll start to get an understanding of how this could really work and really explore these key things like, what is the working relationship all about? What was it like? How do we move it from being very adversarial? How could you better engage suppliers and vendors? If you have multiple tiers to the business model, sometime a supplier that has a great idea, that innovation is not able to bubble up to the surface and find its way onto the project. And and that's unfortunate. Overall, how do we manage risk, and how can we use technology to get rid of a lot of those transactional costs that I talked about earlier? But the second phase of pilot projects is actually to test it on a real project. And we're looking at a smaller type project that we could be done with a small cohort of, I'll say, 8 to 12 firms that behave using all the principles of the digital neighborhood, that pool the risk, that do all the things we've been talking about. And we're looking to do that even this fall, at least identify the types of pilot projects and maybe get them started in 2021. There are a lot of companies in our industry that are looking for a bit of a radical approach at this point. Their capital budgets, as you all have pointed out, were impacted pretty significantly. And some projects aren't even going to move forward if there's not a radical different, and I'm using the word radical probably too loosely, but a new approach that really challenges the status quo way of doing a project. And so they're looking for a new type that a project execution business model that can really help them succeed. And some people are pretty frustrated with the inability of the current business model to deliver. And so I think these are the types of companies that will want to be involved in the pilot project. And if you're one of those companies, by all means, please let us know that as well. So the path forward here is really to work on this new commercial model to try to assure fairness and profitability for everybody so that nobody gets hurt in these projects. We're following a very different approach. It's pretty non-traditional. We're involving researchers that are not the norm to develop this neighborhood and take on these sources of transactional waste. The good news is a lot of other industries have done this. And so we're not pioneering a path all by ourselves. One of the reasons we're involving people who have knowledge of aerospace, high tech, automotive, other industries, is that we can do tech transfer. We can apply the lessons learned from those other industries in. And the people will point out, like, yes, but construction is different. All projects are unique. Temporary and unique is the definition of a project. And in the automotive sector, they're just producing a number of vehicles every day that are roughly the same. So the part of the automotive industry that we look to is not the manufacturing side, but actually the product development side. That is highly, can be highly replicated between an industry such as automotive and the engineering and construction business. So the main point of the webinar here is that we're trying to engage you. We want to get your perspective. We want your perspective to come into the research, and it really is going to boil down to a 30 or 45-minute interview with our research teams. And based on the areas of research that you showed some interest in, we can contact you. There's going to be a point here, a poll on the next slide here that will identify your willingness to be contacted. So we're not going to just blindly cold call you if you don't want that, but this is an opportunity for you to be engaged with these researchers, and we will give you results from that effort. Like I said, probably 30, 45 minutes to talk with our research teams to get your perspective, but it is very needed. So this brings up the poll, and I think there's yeah, here we go. So the blue screen here, and you can check all that apply, but we're looking for you to indicate the extent to which you're willing to assist in this research effort, and you can see the different things. So the first one is you're willing to be interviewed, I'll say about 45 minutes, by one of the research teams in one of the areas of your interest. The second one is if you're willing to make an introduction to our researchers to key suppliers that you have at your firm. In order for us to get a broad perspective of the industry, that's necessary. The third one is you're interested in helping on the pilot projects, whether that happens to be the retroactive examination of projects that are recently completed or in flight, or it's you want to be involved directly on a project with, I'll say, 10 other companies to test out these principles. The fourth one is you can't participate in the research at this time, but you'd like to learn more. And then the fourth one is just if you want to be contacted about something else. And so you can check any or all of these things, and we'll give you a second to do that. And Mike, when you're ready, we can show the results probably. Okay, so Thank you. And you might be wondering, for those of you who answered in any one of these categories, how is it that we would be able to contact you? The answer is when you registered for the webinar and the link that you used to log into the webinar, it uniquely identified you. So we're able to get our researchers to come talk to you in the areas that you have specific interests. So thank you for that. And with that, that really concludes the formal part of the presentation, and I think we just move to the question and answer session. Oh, there is one other thing that I did want to mention before we move to Q&A, and that is we do have some of our research teams do have information sessions coming up. They'll be conducting either town halls or webinars at the dates and times that you see here. People who attended or registered for this session will be informed by email of these things. Right now, there are 2 of our research teams that have informations coming up. One is the blockchain for smart contracts and risk management. That'll be at the end of the month on June 30th, and there's a link and meeting password for Zoom. That'll be at 3 o'clock Central Time. The other one is our supplier engagement researchers. That'll be on Thursday, July the 9th at 2 Central, and we'll provide the link and the information for that later. So jot those down and save the date if you're interested in those. And the other 2 teams are definitely interested in having a town hall, but we'll notify you later on about those opportunities. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike, who will facilitate some Q&A and then close us out.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So I have a question. Stephen, we'll go to you with this one. Are there current membership sponsorship opportunities, and how would people go about that?
Sure. So the industrial affiliates program, the research side of things, we can still accept new affiliates into that. As you saw before, we've got 3 owner companies and 2 industry groups. We are looking for suppliers and EPCs and other types of contractors to be involved. And I think you can just do that by contacting me or Carlos. All the contact information is at os2.construction-institute.org. So it's the CI website, but at the front end of it, you just put in OS2 and you can get some more information that way. I don't know, Carlos, if there's any other thought you had as well.
Yeah, I think you summarized it. Probably the best way would be to reach out to one of us to discuss these opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay. Can an interested non-member organization participate?
Yes. So even though the IAP is under the umbrella of CII, it actually is open to anybody to participate. And especially on the research data collection and the interviews, we want a very wide perspective beyond CII. So we're even reaching out to other industry groups. Procurement Executives Group, for example, is quite interested in helping us. Their supply chain people, they're interested. So the research data collection effort is quite broad, but literally anybody can become a member and participate in this research.
Okay, and then a couple of participation from an individual standpoint. Are there certain roles or titles that you want participation from?
Yes, but that varies from team to team. So that will be a question that will probably be better answered when you meet with the specific teams. And that's one of the reasons why we are trying to have these additional information sessions where the teams are going to be more specific about the research that they are doing and what are the research needs, what kind of people they want to talk to, and that. But again, depending on the research topic, you may be interested more in talking about people in the procurement and supply chain, for example, for the supplier engagement research team. The folks in the dynamic risk modeling, they want to talk more with people that do risk management, portfolio management, and controls, and so on. So it varies a little bit from research team to research team.
Okay. Thanks.
The good thing is that there are opportunity for all roles, right? Because it's such a broad topic that we would like to reach out to really a broad group of folks in different roles in the organizations.
Okay, great. As an individual, not representing a company, personally in transition, what sort of time commitment is expected with each, or specifically the second topic, the supplier engagement? Is this similar to participating in a traditional CII research team, or is it different?
Well, the way that we are approaching that, realizing that, and that's why in the previous poll that Stephen showed, we kind of put different levels of commitment, because well, from the affiliates, the sponsors, they are heavily involved and their commitment, it's much bigger, right? But in terms of the research development, I think the research teams will be able to accommodate your constraints, because from their perspective, even if you can only participate on one interview, I think this is beneficial. So if you can be involved more actively in several interviews or meetings and so on, they will welcome that as well. But it's flexible in that sense. So it's not like the CI research team that you are in that team and everybody has kind of the same time commitment. This is more flexible in a sense.
Okay, thanks. Stephen, this one probably for you. This is from an academic researcher. Is there going to be an RFQ announcement for soliciting proposals on these topics?
Well, right now, as we're just trying to get through the first phase of the research, so probably there won't be until the earliest it'd be the beginning of next year. But I think if we do get more affiliates, more participation, we would broaden this out and involve others. I don't know if we would use an RFQ for that purpose, but it's a possibility. I don't know, Carlos, if you had some other thoughts on that too.
Well, we haven't discussed that in details yet with the affiliates, because our focus in the first year was to define the research program areas and have these 4 teams started, right? And then we had the COVID situation and some of the interruptions there, but that's one topic we're discussing our upcoming affiliate. We have a meeting coming up in July, but probably this topic will be discussed in the one that we have in September, in terms of what will be the subsequent research, next phase of these research topics.
Okay. Stephen, we'll send this one to you. With many companies at different stages of digital maturity, how do you intend to ensure significant participation in digital collaboration?
Yeah, I think the thing we do talk about there is having it be more open source. So the business model, and we even talk about it's not going to probably just be one platform, but multiple platforms. A lot of these blockchain technologies allow people to come into this using whatever technology that they're on, so it can accommodate, for example, a number of different design or 3D BIM type platforms. The business model, the way we look at it, is sort of separate, and you can use any other technology. And as companies digitalize, this is intended to feed into that. So even if some companies are running ERP, enterprise resource planning systems, or other things, should be able to incorporate or interface directly with the digital neighborhood. So that is by design. Some of the computing, and we didn't really get into it, but there's some landmark stuff happening here that has a lot to do with how do you anonymously share your individual perspective of your commercial terms and your view of risk and those kinds of things. Share that anonymously, but pool it so that people can understand and respond to that collectively. And that's a pretty powerful concept that might not just apply just to our engineering and construction business, but other industries as well. So there's a lot of really interesting things happening here, but I'd like to be able to think that we're doing it in a way that's open source so that people don't feel like they went down the road of digitalization and got stuck so that they can't then now play in this environment. We don't want to have that happen.
Okay.
And just to add to what Stephen, just to add to what Stephen just said, when we started working with the researchers, as said, representing different areas, different departments, it's interesting that when we start discussing with them and looking at some of the solutions that may be applied to our industry, and then they suddenly realize that, well, these may also benefit other sectors. And what you see is that the researchers, even though they are like in electrical engineering or they may be in sociology, but they think that some of the things that they're learning by doing research for us are also going to contribute to them in their own specific domains and even be applied to other sectors, which further motivates them to be doing the research work. And then we learn also from others, right?
Okay. Is there a hypothesized return on investment we expect in building a neighborhood dynamically managing risk and the use of blockchain?
Yeah, from the outset of this, we've been thinking it's not completely frictionless, but we showed that there's about 41% of the cost of a project that's transactional waste. So you can't get rid of all of it, but we've been talking about not only lowering the cost by about a third for the projects, so just think about 33, 35%, but also drastically improving the profitability of everybody who's in the supply chain. And that's also why I shared the statistics from McKinsey that was talking about these new profit pools are being created, and they say the incumbent players could easily double their profitability. But you get that, it's sort of the Walmart approach that if you can get enough volume, you know, a very small percentage of an extremely large number is still a big number. And so that's where we can both lower the cost of the projects by lowering the risk profile and then also assuring more fairness and profitability for everybody who's involved here. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to create, is a much healthier industry that's not dog eat dog, but and you know, one zero-sum game where one person wins at the expense of another, but yet get to a very healthy, robust industry, financially speaking, where people achieve a fair amount of money and profitability for the work that they're doing.
Okay, one last question. How do you do this cooperative environment in a competitive bidding industry?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we are trying to change, right? So how can we do it? How can we do it differently? Recognizing where we are coming from and what are the roots in terms of the industry. And
yeah, I think the
commercial model. I think part of that, it's okay. How can we work differently?
Yeah, I think we're trying to study and understand the root causes of where risks come from. And, you know, in a competitively bidding situation, you have lots of companies. As I said, there's basically one company for every $1 million of spend. So if you have a $500 million project, there's 500 companies. And each of them have a different perspective of risk. And so they're pricing in contingency and management reserve and a number of other things. So I think this new approach to commercial model fundamentally challenges whether we're going to even have competitive bidding in the future, or whether we're going to have projects offered up by investors that are looking for this. They'll put that into the digital neighborhood. You'll have a group of companies that will kind of work with each other to figure out how best to tackle that particular project scenario. Maybe, and this is where we talk about engaging suppliers to bring innovation to the forefront. But I think we might not have competitive bidding. So this is something that we have to study a bit more.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Carlos and Stephen, for explaining what's happening with OS2. And thank you very much to you, the audience, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. Don't forget to check out our events page to sign up for future webinars. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.
Thanks.